Good evening, everyone. It is great to have you here. It is Tuesday, September 17th, 2024, and coming to you live from the Athens-Clarke County City Hall. We are here for a couple of reasons this evening. We have a special called session with a couple of items to consider, and then our regularly scheduled agenda-setting session. We'll go ahead and begin our special called session with a roll call.
Davenport.
Here.
Link. Here. Taylor. Here. Wright.
Present.
Fisher. Poole.
Here.
Culpepper.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Thornton. Hamby.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, we'll begin as we always do with our civility pledge provided to us by the Georgia Municipal Association, and that indicates that the way we govern ourselves is often as important as the positions we take, that our collective decisions will be better when differing views have had the opportunity to be fully vetted and considered, that all people have the right to be treated with respect, courtesy, and openness, and finally, that we value all input and we commit to conduct ourselves at all times with civility and courtesy to each other. So we appreciate our peers across the state who also follow those same edicts. Have very briefly a proclamation to announce just here at the beginning of our gathering, and that is the Georgia Reads Day proclamation, in which we're also joined by many cities across the state. Georgia Reads Day is the 16th of September, and so I just want to indicate that whereas literacy is not just an education, but an issue of economic, workforce, and quality of life, it is a predictor of future educational achievement, economic status, and lifelong health and well-being. And whereas in 2023, 61% of Georgia fourth graders did not read proficiently, and whereas the Georgia General Assembly recognized the importance of literacy skills with the passage of two bills in 2023, SB 211, which created the Georgia Council on Literacy, and HB 538, that requires comprehensive educational reform for reading instruction in the science of reading. And whereas understanding that collaborative efforts and strategic partnerships must be undertaken to effectively address literacy issues, the Georgia Municipal Association and its nonprofit partner, Georgia City Solutions, and members of the Georgia General Assembly, and now football champion turned children's author Malcolm Mitchell have partnered with the Georgia Council on Literacy to launch Georgia Reads at the 2024 Georgia GMA Annual Convention. And whereas community involvement is essential to literacy improvements, and that Georgia Reads will include recognizing 10 community partnerships that have increased literacy in the past 3 to 5 years, and whereas this September marks a date when all Georgians are encouraged to create awareness around the importance of reading and encourage community partnerships. Now, therefore, I do recognize Georgia Reads Day through this proclamation. So thank you for everybody in Atlanta and across the state who's been involved in that. All right, now on to our business, my friends. We have two items, one under old business and one under new business. While we were taking a vote tonight, we do have public input on these opportunities, and public input will approximately be the same throughout the evening with some slight deviation that I'll discuss when we get to planning and zoning items. Public input opportunities are for up to 3 minutes of public input at each opportunity. You can begin speaking, and I will ask you to note your name and your place of residence. You have 3 minutes at each public input opportunity. The light in front of the clerk will turn green when you begin speaking, yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and red when your 3 minutes has concluded. And I will thank you for your time here tonight. So, all of that said, is there anyone here to speak to either of the items on our special called session agenda, which is in front of you? All right, given opportunity, we're going to move on to discussion on the commission level. And so we have an item of old business, which is the scope of service and contract awards for business development and workforce support funding. Would a commissioner like to place a motion on the floor?
Yeah.
Commissioner Myers.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve this item with the removal of the, where we have the funding for One Breath CNA, the $75,000 for One Breath CNA, but approve the rest of it as outlined in the agenda report.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we've got a motion from Commissioner Myers, and we have a second from Commissioner Wright. Commissioner Myers, obviously, we've discussed this in great detail, but is there anything else you'd like to provide tonight?
No, I just, I am really glad, looked through the applications for the the organizations that are being funded here, and I think they're all adding something a little bit different and a little bit missing from our workforce development. So I'm really glad that we've are able to move this forward. And I want to thank all the people who worked on that workforce task with Commissioner Tiffany Taylor there across from me, and all the staff that helped put this together as well. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Wright, any follow-up?
I just wanted to thank staff for their follow-up from the, helping the applicants get their paperwork ready and everything turned in, and just to say that that one was taken out due to not meeting the deadlines of the specifics required. But I appreciate staff's extra work with the extra time on getting it together.
Absolutely. Commissioner Davenport.
Quick question. So with the withdrawal of the CNA of 75,000, does that pot of money go back to the bigger bucket? Of ARPA
So,
funds?
yeah, that's our, adds to our now unallocated ARPA bucket,
Okay, thank you.
which we'll be voting on first of next month and discussing at our retreat on Thursday. Anything further? All right, there is a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries. All right, we have one item of new business. I do need a motion for suspension of rules since this is the first reading.
So moved.
Second.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Wright and a second from Commissioner Taylor for suspension of rules. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries. All right, I'm going to ask Manager Jones to follow up with a little more detail, but I'll say broadly, one of the things that we are always working on are capital upgrades. And so capital upgrades sometimes mean that there is disruption in our normal operating processes and procedures. And that is going to have to be the case when we replace the elevators in the historic courthouse on Washington Street. And so we need some alternate venues in order to operate. Manager Jones, would you follow up with any other notes?
That's absolutely correct, Mayor, and this is just part of the contingency plan, if you will. We are currently working on the elevators in the courthouse to make sure they're fully operational, but just in case, we do have an agenda item in this cycle as well to address that, so that's part of this as well.
Yeah, Commissioner Houle.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question, and then I'm happy to make a motion. It's for the attorney. Does this resolution expire once the elevators are repaired, or should we, in our motion, note some kind of expiration?
When I was looking at the resolution, I think the whereas provisions provide that it only goes into effect in the event there's an emergency, they don't have the elevator. So I would say, and the way I understand it, that if the, it would go out of effect once the elevators are repaired, or may not go into effect unless all the elevators go down. But we certainly could add, if it's okay, we could talk, we could see about adding a deadline, a date certain, or just say shall terminate upon repair of the elevators.
Okay, yeah, I'll make a motion to approve with the additional provision that this terminates upon repair of the elevators.
All right, got a motion with that provision. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, got a second from Commissioner Hamby. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Sure. I'm just wondering how long it's going to take the elevators to get fixed.
Approximately 7 to 9 months. Just got a report on that, Commissioner Hamby, and just for clarification purposes, there are 2 elevators that we are working on, and the current courthouse is working under 1 elevator. So 7 to 9 months to fully modernize 2 elevators with the hopes that the other elevator does not go down.
Okay. And I'll just ask that because I think we had a similar situation over in the Western Street deck, and they're working on that. But what they did is they took one part from the elevator and put it in the other elevator, and at least they got one working elevator now. Has any of that been considered just to help us along?
We did consider that approach, Commissioner Hamby, and candidly, that's what we've been doing there. And
You've already gotten all the parts out of the good
That's-
elevators? And
yes, sir.
Oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Never mind.
Sanford and Son of Courthouse Elevator Repair Strategies. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries. All right, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn our special called session.
So moved.
Second.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Taylor and a second from Commissioner Link to adjourn our special called session. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries. And we are going to move on to our agenda setting session. In the agenda-setting session, if you're paying attention to the format of our meetings, we have the consent agenda, and these have been previously discussed by the agenda-setting team and will be handled in a single vote at the voting meeting in October. We have several planning commission items. Those will have individual opportunities for public input, and then we have old and new business. So there will be an opportunity for public input in just a moment on the consent agenda, opportunities on each of the planning and zoning items individually, and then an opportunity for old and new business. I'd like to ask members of the public, is there anyone who would like to speak to any item on the consent agenda at this point? And those are items 1 through 13. 1 through 13. So this is the opportunity to speak to any of those items, 1 through 13. All right, seeing none, is there any commissioner who would like to remove an item from consent for discussion? Commissioner Hool.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to remove item 10, please.
Any others?
Number 26.
That's already on discussion, Commissioner.
Oh, okay.
Anything 1 through 13?
I see what you.
All right. We will go ahead and we will move to our planning and zoning items. I'm going to relocate.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, can I also remove 6 for a question, please?
6 as well. Yep. So 6 and 10 will both go on discussion. All right. I'm going to slide out of here so we can pull the screen down, and we're going to have Planning Director Bruce Lonnie come up. How are you? I'm well. How are you? Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. We do the administrative dance. And we're moving now to item 14 when the screen gets up, which is the first of our 5 items to come with the Planning Commission recommendation. All right. Bruce, what do you have for us?
All right. Good evening. We've got a handful of items that came through the Planning Commission at their September 5th meeting. We'll walk through those. First item is a special use request in the RS-15 zone. It's at 615 Tallassee Road. Special use is for a daycare and a school expansion. The Washika Montessori School has been there for many years. They've had plans to make an expansion, and they're finally getting a chance to realize that. So they're looking at a 2,800 square foot single-story building that would be on some minor site improvements, and you'll see a photograph that shows you why it's minor. So here's an aerial view of the current property on the south side of Tallassee Road, just after the bend of going past the railroad. We have future land use of single-family residential. Schools are a special use when you have single-family residential uses, and that is the zoning that's there, is RS-15, single-family residential. This approval would give us an opportunity, from a regulatory standpoint, to take a school that predates our current standards and get them up to date with special use criteria. So it kind of cleans house a little bit. And here's that site where the building's going to go. So very modest site work, because the site work was already padded out many years ago in anticipation of this very project. It just takes a while to see things to this point. Here's the site plan that was submitted. This would become a binding site plan upon approval. The area in the dark, in the black, is where that footprint would be for the new 2,800 square foot classroom building. You can see a pedestrian connection along the parking area that would connect to that and also bring the students over to the existing building. Here's a layout of that building and architectural representation of it that would also become binding. Planning Commission's evaluation of this is they found it to be compatible with the 2023 comprehensive plan. It was also compatible with future land use map, zoning map, and ordinance other than the special use criteria, but they also found that the criteria had been met. Planning Commission's recommendation is approval with a lone condition. That condition deals with putting sidewalk along the frontage on Tallassee Road. And we've got code standards for how that should be done, and that's referenced in the condition. And that's the staff report.
All right, is there any member of the public here to speak to this item? All right, seeing none, we'll come to discussion. This is in District 5, and unfortunately, Commissioner Fisher is not able to join us this evening. Would anyone else like to make any notes or questions about this item? Bruce, the one note that I'd make is that an as-yet unconstructed SPLOST project is a Tallassee Road multi-use path. And so I'm wondering if we may want to coordinate for some slightly amended language with leisure services for that greenway segment.
Absolutely, and we've had, I should do this, Jeff's going to get after me. We've had discussions similar to that with other projects about setting aside easement area to accommodate the multi-use path instead of just your standard 5-foot wide sidewalk. Tallassee Road is interesting because you don't have curb and gutter section, you have swales.
Yep.
So it's kind of hard to place those facilities sometimes. So we will definitely be working with them in cooperation with Public Works, Leisure Services, and the school folks.
Yeah, and just in terms of kind of all the ways that construction elements intersect, I'd hate for them to construct a 5-foot sidewalk, just knowing that maybe in 18 months, that would get demolished and replaced by a multi-use path. So
Yeah.
Just some considerations maybe as we think about the voting meeting. Commissioner Houle?
Yeah, I guess while we're here, I'm just curious, we've been talking a lot about sewer capacity issues lately, including just down the road from here at Mitchell Bridge. Do we have any reason to believe that there's a sewer problem with this, or?
This project's on septic,
Okay, it's,
and they plan to remain on septic.
okay.
All right, we're going to move on to 15.
All right. There we go. Next item is at 204 Old Hull Road. This is a rezone request. The ask is to go from commercial general zoning to RM2, so from a commercial category to our mixed density residential zoning. Also, a future land use change would be required to set the table for that rezone request, so this would be a 2-vote item. The request is to go from general business to mixed density residential, future land use. This is a non-binding plan to build 16 detached units, total of 58 bedrooms proposed. What the applicant has indicated is a series of cottages, detached cottages that front on Old Hull Road with their parking in the rear. So here's an aerial view of the property on Old Hull Road. If you've been down this section anytime in the last 15, 20 years, you've seen this condition. So you have a lot of multifamily that already exists out there. The property immediately to the south with the entrance to the west is also zoned commercial general. It was developed as multifamily at a point in time where you could do that by right, and that has changed, but that predates our code change in 2000. So that tells you the vintage of that construction. You also see the shopping center there immediately to the west of that. Here's a future land use that we have on site for the property right now. The area that is kind of dashed, it's hard to see red on red, but it's going from general business to mixed density residential. One of the things to point out here is a lot of this future land use and this zoning predates the construction of the 10 loop. So Old Hull Road, at one point in time, this property was designated as highway business or local business intended for commercial development because Old Hull Road carried the bulk of the traffic. That changed. So the disposition of this property and the development character around there has also changed as a result over the years, and this is kind of one of those last remaining pieces. Here is the concept plan, non-binding, but this is what they have submitted to show a potential layout. The applicant has seemed sincere that they want to have a detached product out there. The reason for that is the topo of the property is tough to work with. So working with it this way gives them opportunities to do the construction efficiently. It also produces a different kind of housing product out there than what's immediately adjacent, and that is part of their interest, is to provide some variety. Planning Commission's evaluation found that it was compatible with the 2023 comprehensive plan. Infill housing development's being provided. It's providing supply and variety of housing along Old Hull Road that is new. It's also the potential to complement a town center node that we're currently considering as part of our current growth concept map. They also found that it's compatible with the future land use map, zoning map, and related ordinances. So Planning Commission's recommendations are twofold. One, approve the future land use change, and two, to approve the rezoning request as submitted. That's the end of the staff report.
All right, thank you, Bruce. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Good evening, just give us your name and place of residence for the record.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Frank Pittman. I live at 1400 Saxon Road in Watkinsville. I would kind of repeat a little bit of what Bruce said. This property, it's about 2.5 acres. It's surrounded by multifamily today. It's just kind of a piece that was kind of left over when the road system changed. It's not a commercial corridor and likely would never be a commercial corridor. So the request would be to rezone it to an RM2, which would allow for my client to provide 58 beds in a cottage development, which would provide much-needed housing along with a different type of housing stock in the area. There is water and sewer available there. Staff has looked at that. I think it fits in with what's there, and it helps us provide a little bit different housing than what's there. Everything out there is kind of that 90s style, 3-story apartment buildings that, a little outdated. As Bruce mentioned, staff recommended approval, and so did the Planning Commission, and I hope that you guys see it the same way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pittman. Is there anyone else here to speak to this item tonight? All right, it's in District 3, so I'll District 2, so I'll ask Commissioner Link to provide some initial feedback.
Yeah, this sounds like a perfectly reasonable project for this area. And I'm looking at the contour map, and yeah, it is a little wavy. So those detached units make sense. I also think that, those make sense in making it a little more conducive to families, with kids who might want to just step out their door or have their own yard. I have a question. This isn't a binding site plan, correct? Okay, that's fine. I get that. Are any of these duplexes at all, or is that a possibility?
I think it could be a possibility.
Okay. Or duplexes, triplexes?
What's shown on there are just like 3- and 4-bedroom cottages. But I mean,
Okay.
I think I've talked with the owner about maybe doing some duplexes on there to kind of break it up a little bit more
Okay.
too.
Okay, I think that's the only questions I have.
Any other feedback on this one?
I have a quick
Yeah,
question.
Commissioner Wright.
Bruce, can you go back to the image that had the arrow when you were pointing to, because I'm looking at where the driveway is. Okay, so the arrow has nothing to do with the driveway. Okay, and so then the arrow, so let me look at that, and then where's the picture that shows the driveway on the other side of the street as a comparison? Can you put your cursor to show us the, so,
the proposed driveway is central,
okay,
and there's the curb cut that you see, and the topography here drops away.
yeah,
So this is where it's closest to grade, these two driveways that serve this development across the street.
yeah, so
But
those.
the new driveway would be at appropriate distance away and central to this site.
Perfect, okay, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, there wasn't any way to line it up. Our property doesn't go far enough.
Well, and it wouldn't be good with the curve. I don't
Right.
think they would have allowed those other ones nowadays. I don't know. But anyway, thanks for explaining. Looks great.
All right, I'm going to move on to item 16.
All right. Item 16 is a special use permit request for 3 properties, 1825, 1885, and 1889 Lexington Road. The agenda notes 1875 Lexington Road, but it is 1885. The request, as submitted, was a special use in the airport overlay to allow for multifamily development. During the development of this review and working with the applicant, there's actually a second special use request that has now come to be a part of this application, and that is to allow for ground floor residential in a commercial zone. And we'll show you in a minute why that's a part of this. The description of the project is as follows: 144 units, 228 beds total, arranged in 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, 252 parking spaces with 4 buildings, clubhouse. There would be a Lexington Road connection, but also a connection onto Hollis Street, which is a residential property to the east and rear. And as I noted, this is in the airport overlay, but we also have environmental areas on site, some creeks, creek bottoms, and some very steep slopes on the northern side, the rear side of the property. This is a view of the property there in the black and red hatching. The airport overlay zones, you have a sampler platter of airport overlay zones on this one site. Transitional zone, the approach zone, as well as runway protection zone. This item went to the Airport Authority for consideration and recommendation prior to the Planning Commission seeing it. Their recommendation, which is in your packet, was approval as proposed. Yes, ma'am.
If we could just say that they approved it because it's not flashing lights or they're not using reflective.
Thank you.
Is why it was approved.
There are conditions of approval as part of their, but they are recommending approval, so it's a recommending body. It's not a final, but it is a recommendation, and they did have conditions of approval, and we'll have those listed here at the end. From a future land use standpoint, there is no change in future land use proposed, but you can see that little bit of commercial at the front. General business is in the red. Traditional neighborhood is in the rear, which is the vast majority of the property. Zoning on the ground is commercial general on the front, and we have RM at RM1 on that northern part. Those boundaries of those zones are not changing with this request. It was really entirely for the airport overlay and then also for consideration of multifamily residential on the main floor in that commercial area. All right, and this is showing those environmental areas, the creek bottoms that are to the north of the property and some of the other issues. So here's some photographs of the site as you see it from Lexington Road. This is the driveway extending off of Lexington Road, the former driveway that served the home that was there. And then this is the view at the end of Hollis Street, so very dense growth through there. Here's the site plan that was submitted. The view that you see on the left is the inset from this plan. There is a condition of approval that's being recommended to change some of the wording on that inset because it does reference some changes to the airport property, and those changes are not accurate for what the airport master plan is talking about doing. On the right is what would be a binding site plan, and there you can see those 4 building footprints, plus a clubhouse structure here. This is the area that would be in the commercial general zone, and code would typically require for us to have commercial uses on the ground floor where we have commercial zoning. And so they're asking for a second special use approval as part of this application. Some representative architecture for the clubhouse as well as for the residential buildings. Staff notes, just want to make it clear, when we got this application in, we needed to work through the fact that it's actually 2 special use requests. And I can't think of a time in my time here where we've had this happen, where we've had both the airport overlay involved, but also seeking relief from that no commercial on the main standard, or no residential on the main standard for commercial zoning. The application also alluded to using inclusionary zoning, but it wasn't really fleshed out. And in the review of this, because it is a binding plan, we identified 11 code compliance issues as part of the submittal, and we found some conflicting information between the report and the plans. So in talking with the applicant, they were able to provide some information at the Planning Commission meeting, which was a memo, looked like this, should be in your packet, that responded to those things that were identified in staff's evaluation. Planning Commission accepted this as an exhibit, made it a part of the record. So this was folded into their evaluation, but what they found was kind of a mix. We have compatibility with the comprehensive plan in that it's infill development. It's a possible opportunity to increase access to affordable housing. They also found that it's maybe not quite meeting up exactly with the comprehensive plan in that it's not introducing much variety of housing, although it is next to a single-family subdivision. So if you look at it from that standpoint, perhaps it's a modest bit of variety. And that it's not really in line with the general business future land use expectation of having mixed-use development. And because they needed the special use, it's not compatible with the zoning map and the ordinance. So Planning Commission's recommendation landed here. Following acceptance of this exhibit and the information presented by Mr. Carter, they recommended approval of both special use requests with the following conditions. The first being related to airport operations. Prior to approval of any permit, the owner and/or applicant must submit an airport noise agreement and a waiver of rights, which is essentially an understanding that airport operations are immediately next door, and so that's normal function. Essentially, no complaints about the fact that you're next door to the airport, including using the Georgia Power good sense insulation requirements to help mitigate some of that sound attenuation, and a deed restriction along those lines. Second condition, having an easement along Lexington Road for a future multi-use trail as proposed by the Greenway Network Plan. And the third condition, that this Exhibit 1 be made binding and be a part of the application report and plans, so it would carry the same weight as the site plan and the architectural drawings to help clarify the issues that were raised in staff's evaluation. And that concludes staff's report.
All right, thank you, Bruce, I appreciate it. Is there anyone here to speak to this application? All right, seeing none, Commissioner Taylor, this is over in District 3. Any input on this one?
Yeah. Well, I'll just say that I'll just continue to read the notes from the planning department before I make any comments.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, did the airport authority say anything about the height of this? That's my only concern. I mean, being in that zone.
And I can tell you planning department staff followed up with airport staff to make sure that we had our bases covered. The interesting thing about this site is it sits down in a hole. So the height of those structures is not at the same grade as the road, and it sits lower than the grade of the road. So it's kind of favorable in that regard for airport operations. It meets that inverted slope coming off the approach as well as the runway. It satisfies all of the FAA standards in the review of the airport authority.
Commissioner Davenport?
Can we get a report from, is that typical that we get a report from the airport? So Mike is one of the, I think this is a good idea, a great plan, but, so just a year ago, at 480 Gaines School Road, I had an idea of, we had discussed about putting a library at 480 Gaines School Road right across from Civitan, and we were told that because FAA regulations don't allow us to build where planes are landing, we can't build structures that are going to have a large capacity. So I'm just kind of confused as to why this was approved, because it's just right at runway 27 where the planes come in to land. So I'm just kind of conflicted and confused as to why one was allowed and why this was approved and the potential for the Eastside Library denied.
So I have heard from the airport director on this. Matthews, he noted that it's actually sitting in a hole, so it's a little bit lower, and it does not impact our approaches at all.
And we did talk at length about the operational difference between that runway versus the east-west runway. So I can share that. And I will be happy to, I thought it was in the packet, and we'll make sure everybody gets a copy of the findings from the airport authority. We'll make sure that's sent out to everyone so that you can see it in their hand, their wording. We are paraphrasing, we are lifting their wording in our report, but we'll give you the actual letter. the north-south runway, that shorter runway that would go over that site on Gaines School Road, those are single-engine aircraft. And if there is a problem with single-engine aircraft, they're instructed to land in a straight line, not to churn, not to make it back to the airport. Just bring the craft down. The east-west runway has more than a single-engine aircraft. It's meant for jets. And those planes, by design, have the opportunity to recover and return to the airport. So it's a different set of safety issues that are being considered between this particular site and those on Gaines School Road. We had a similar question to what you're asking.
And Bruce, as I understand it, the library was in the direct approach of the pathway, and this particular parcel is not. Believe it or not, because it's so close. They're just different approach ways.
I just remember about 10 years ago, there was a plane that crashed right there. Y'all remember that was over there by the movie theater? So
It's terrible.
I'm just saying, like, we're considering, because that incident, the unfortunately the pilot passed, but he missed his calculation or something, and there was some engine trouble. But I just have some concerns about putting that much density right at the airport. But I look forward to discussing more.
Commissioner Wright?
Just my orientation out there, is this behind what used to be the putt-putt?
It's beside it.
It's beside it, right. So what's the Lexington Vintage Antique Store? It has the big rooster that got stolen. Okay, I just want to make sure it's tucked in there, because I know how, if you go into that antique area, the dip down. And so then there is a visual that can help us see, because it seems like the imagery in the packet doesn't include the whole airport part. So is there another image that we can get to help us visualize what, a little bit more in context with the whole airport to see?
That inset slide may be helpful. The kind of left.
Yeah, I guess it's probably, I don't need anybody to make a new drawing, but it would be a combination of the two.
Right.
So is this in scale then, this part of the property over here to the far left?
Yes.
But it doesn't give us the appreciation of the topography.
That's right.
We have to go to Google Maps to get that?
Well, the site plan does show the topographical lines.
Okay, I see that.
Yep.
But yet not in relation to the,
And so the properties along Hollis Street sit higher than
Yes.
this site. So it drops as you go west.
and those are all small.
There's a layer in Q Public that helps with that too, if you want to check there. Commissioner Myers?
Okay, I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, just following up on that airport zone, didn't we have a rezoning request about 3 years ago on this after I came on the commission? I believe it was the same property. Do you remember what the airport decision was on that, recommendation on that at that time?
The airport authority at that time, and that development had commercial functions in it. So that's a key distinction. It also had a development footprint that was slightly further north, so a little bit closer to the end of the runway,
Right, I remember.
just slightly.
Yeah.
But they recommended denial of that proposal, but it was different. It wasn't exactly the same as this.
Okay, and then a follow-up question. One of those conditions you mentioned, if you can go back to that one with the conditions that mentions a greenway, I just want to make sure that that is actually correct, because if I just pulled up the greenway map, and I also, we're talking about this with the Lexington projects, and that greenway that that we just approved, that would go right from across from Atlas by the quarry. And if I remember correctly on that, one of the reasons for that was because there was not going to be a multi-use, like the new intersection that's being worked on does not accommodate a path down there at all to go through that way. In addition, I think if you were going to refer to anything, you might, I think it might be the Athens in Motion plan, the Greenway network I just pulled up, doesn't look like it goes there. So just
Okay.
check that, because I wouldn't want it to come back later and they're going, well, that's not the Greenway. But I'm not even, I would just look into that.
It may be, if I'm remembering that recent presentation that we saw in a work session, that the multi-use path sort of goes to the north of this prospective project rather than along the
Right,
roadway.
it kind of cuts it, rather than go through the intersection where all the traffic is, that multi-use path was cutting across close to the quarry to avoid that. And therefore, because I asked, why aren't we doing the sidewalks there first? And that was the reason, or maybe they are putting sidewalks there, so like, check into that, because I think they're not putting stuff on the other end. But I would just check with those plans that just came through SPLOST and TPW.
We'll follow, this comment came from there, but we'll double check.
Okay, well, you know, who knows more, them or me?
Commissioner Cool.
Thank you, Mayor.
Joke.
Quick procedural question. Two special uses, but it's all approved as one vote.
It is a single application, a single special use application that has two parts.
Okay.
It's one vote.
And then I'm looking at the report, and there's the site plan that's binding, and then there's another one at the end stamped non-binding. Can you help me understand what the non-binding one at the end is all about?
Non-binding is usually where we see our landscaping, tree management plan.
Okay.
We want them to have the flexibility to be able to do the right things with that and not have to come back to you for moving a tree or two.
Okay. And that's the only thing that's non-binding, everything else is?
That's right.
Okay. And then the third question is about the inclusionary zoning. So I'm looking through, and it's tough because the PDFs that we get are not control F-able, so it's hard to know if I found anything, if I missed something here, but the exhibit that they provided, or the report they provided that got made into an exhibit, it gives the allowable density bonus, and that's kind of the only thing they reference as far as I can tell. So can you just help me understand, like, does this actually set it up in a way where they have to include affordable units? And if so, like, what's the AMI that those are going to be set at? And
So as far as that actual agreement, that was not a part of this submittal. And it is kind of outside of the special use review. The density, as we ran the numbers, was 4 units more than what base density would give them.
okay,
So they were using inclusionary zoning to some extent to get to the number that was depicted on the plan. But my understanding is there is agreement in development, and they intend to use the inclusionary zoning by right as it's written, rather than as part of a special use review.
And just while we're on that topic, of course, the inclusionary zoning ordinance is an administrative apparatus. So somebody comes in with a plan, it's approved by staff. But of course, if you've got a binding plan, then that's certainly designating a certain number of buildings and a certain number of units. And so I guess kind of what I'm hearing from you, Bruce, is that if they would be building by a binding plan more units than would be there not under the inclusionary plan, necessarily those extra 4 units would have to be in the affordable category.
That's correct. And this sets a ceiling. So, you know, if they suddenly were able to run the numbers differently and come out with more yield, we have a binding plan that shows this many units. So they would have to amend this special use to be able to realize more units through some other running of the numbers in the inclusionary zoning.
okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess because if it weren't a binding plan and they just used the inclusionary zoning ordinance, more than 4 units would be made affordable in that calculus, right?
Could.
Could be, yeah.
Could.
And so I guess I'm trying to make sense of, like, are we just looking at 4 units here then? And is it 60% or 80% AMI, you know, or is it just sort of up in the air and it'll be something for at least 4 units?
Bruce, I certainly don't want to speak out of turn here, but there's also an agenda item in front of you tonight related to this very specific track. It's for affordable housing. The whole thing is affordable. So the inclusionary zoning doesn't really pertain to this necessarily.
If it were a LIHTC product.
That's right, because it's going to be all affordable. As I understand it, there's also a parking benefit here, Bruce. Is that correct?
That's correct. It allows them to dial down some of the parking standards associated with that.
That's what you're
Okay, thank you.
Okay, a few folks, Commissioner Taylor.
I know we're having the talk on affordable housing, and this is supposed to be family housing. But out of, the amount of bedrooms that's being offered, 3 bedrooms, there's only gonna be 12 units of 3 bedrooms. All the rest will be 1 and 2 bedrooms. And so I don't see how it's for families or, I don't see how it's for families, nor do I really understand why it'll be a housing authority project when it's only 1 and 2. So there's like 77 1-bedrooms and like 60 2-bedrooms and only 12 3-bedrooms. And so for me and my district, I know that there are mamas who will spill out of a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom. And for it to only be a limited amount of 3 bedrooms, I don't see this being for families, for one. I'm kind of worried that this may, if we do go along with the rezone, as well as the pilot, that this will end up another Atlas Athens, and we won't have housing for families. So I feel real iffy. I don't like it.
I think, Commissioner, just sort of given those contours, it probably would be helpful to engage both with the development team and the Athens Housing Authority, who of course have to facilitate by law those low-income housing tax credits that flow through the Department of Community Affairs.
Okay.
So that they probably can weigh in on that mix. One of the phenomenon generally in the development world these days is that we're seeing more longtime childless adults kind of into adulthood. And so I know that that's impacted what we see kind of built on the ground 2024 versus even 20 years ago. So Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I just would like some more clarity on the affordability and the guarantee of affordable housing. And I might be mathing incorrectly, but, so we've got 9.4 acres, 16 bedrooms per acre density for RM1. That comes out to 150 bedrooms, where this is 228 bedrooms. Does that take into account the density bonus from the inclusionary zoning? That's how it works out, okay.
And CG has a higher yield too.
Okay, so the CG zoning is, okay, that makes sense. So I'm looking at the site plan and the concerns with the height. And I see how all that density is concentrated at the front to avoid that airport approach zone and I guess also some environmental area at the back of the plot. So I guess that is kind of what is pushing it towards a higher facade. So if we were to put a condition for a lower facade, it would screw up the affordable, the
Financing.
yeah, okay. So yeah, that height is out of necessity, basically. And thankfully, the topography is lower, so it's able to accommodate. All right.
Commissioner Wright?
I know that we don't have any jurisdiction over the naming, but I'm counting, without going through the list, 6 places that include the flats in there. I'm thinking we could.
Yeah, that's confusing.
We can't really point that out in the planning stage to maybe get something more unique, or is that's?
We'll
getting
just
us
call
in
the
weeds.
mid-2020s the flats era in the future. When the history books are written, this will be the
I'm just-
flats period.
I
in
just,
Athens
you know,
development.
just want to put it out there,
they go,
guys.
the
It's kind of being overused in my book. That's 6.
Commissioner Davenport?
If anybody finds more, let me know.
Just 2 questions about the additional lighting that this complex will have. So maybe I get a report from the airport authority, will lighting from this project interfere with landing? And just for the parking, 228 beds, but there's going to be 252 parking. That typical, I thought it was 1 parking per bedroom. It seems like there's more parking than, is that in our code? I thought it was one parking spot per bedroom.
It's actually two per unit, with the ability for a 50% increase by right. So it effectively could land at 3 spaces per unit regardless of that, how many bedrooms end up in that space.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we will move on to item 17.
And while I'm moving to that, I will, Commissioner Davenport, there are lighting standards in the code as well. Happy to get those to you, but you're spot on, and there are some standards on requiring full-cut fixtures and amber fixtures to not interfere with the operation of the airport.
Okay.
All right, next item is at 290 South Lumpkin Street. This is a rezone request. This is going from government, G-zone, to commercial downtown in the West End District overlay, design overlay. There's a future land use element to this where it would need to change from government to downtown, as this is currently Board of Regents property. And the request is for a private developer to come in and working with the university to take possession of the property. And their proposal right now, albeit non-binding, but working within the commercial downtown zoning's parameters, is to do between 200 and 220 multifamily units, 22,000 square feet of commercial space. They are proposing a centrally located and wrapped parking deck. Of those 300 to 350 spaces, 100 roughly would be available to the public. They're looking at 1 to 2 bedroom units. A portion of that commercial space will serve as the new home of the BCM student ministry, and that is their potential partner for working through some land acquisition with the university. And this is, again, a non-binding proposal, but would work. We have seen a concept, and it satisfies all of our commercial downtown standards and the West End design standards. So to get you oriented, here's an aerial view, kind of centrally across from Candler Hall on North Campus. The property right now is vacant. It's adjacent also, although this aerial still shows the Holiday Inn there, it is not there. So it's next to that area that is being used for parking. Future land use, as noted, going from G, commercial in the blue, to kind of the fuchsia downtown. And rezone would take it from the G to commercial downtown zoning. Here's a view of the site looking across from North Campus at the property. This is at the corner with Ray. And looking from the side street into what is currently being used for surface parking. This is a site survey. This is all that's required to be submitted with a straight rezone. But this kind of shows you the arrangement of the property as it relates to Lumpkin and Ray Street. And then this is what they have shown us as representative architecture for this multi-story building. This is the treatment that they're proposing that would wrap the commercial parking deck. And what you're looking at in this view is looking at Ray Street as reconfigured. The area on the left of this elevation is kind of a vaulted space where it's proposed, see if my cursor will work. This is where BCM would be located. So this would almost serve as a sanctuary space, and the Baptist campus ministries would be in this location, and then everything that comes around the corner and works its way up Lumpkin would be commercial leasable tenant space with residential above. Planning Commission's evaluation found that it's largely compatible with the comprehensive plan. It increases supply and variety of housing. It's an infill location, extends the development of downtown in a compatible location. It's an efficient use of downtown property. It is compatible with future land use map, zoning map, and related ordinances. Noted that it's adding to the tax base without requiring additional infrastructure. And this is also a location where we have a high degree of multimodal transportation opportunity already in place. Planning Commission's recommendation is approval of the future land use change as proposed and also approval of the rezoning request as submitted. That concludes staff's report.
All right. Is there anyone here to speak to item 17? Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for hearing our request. My name is Jeff Warwick, and I own the property at 450 South Lumpkin. We closed on that in January of 2023. in a long-term partnership with the Georgia Baptist Mission Board, or the GBMB. The GBMB has operated a Baptist Collegiate Ministry, or a BCM, organization on that site since 1961, and we are in partnership with them for the next 99 years. And so we are working on this project with them and 5 other ones on other Board of Regents universities across Georgia. We are the most excited about this one for many, many reasons. We have executed also an agreement with the Board of Regents that is effectively a land swap between what we own today at 450 South Lumpkin and 290 South Lumpkin, which we just looked at. And so that is scheduled to close in October. And so no conditions there. It's documented, ready to go. So that's how we get from 450 to 290. So all of that's already completed and finalized. As I said, we are in long-term partnership with the GBMB. That's our mission. That's what we do as a company. That's who we are. We are not out-of-town merchant builders who are plopping down something close to campus and intending to flip it. This is a long-term hold. This is a ministry project for us. This is what we do. And we're most excited about what we're able to do here. If you've seen the property at 450, it's rather old, rather tired. It's an old building that's eventually probably will get used for short order by the university, and then it will become something else. We were approached by the university, the dean of Terry College, the foundation, a while ago during this process to talk about the Terry College and how important it is to the university, which we certainly appreciate today. It's effectively landlocked, and my property stands in the way of the expansion of Terry College up South Lumpkin. And so we feel like we've created a solution here that allows Terry to expand and allows the ministry to continue in a great fashion. We think this is also a terrific solution for the community based on land use and how we're going to have this building set. So we're excited about what we're doing. Again, it's about the ministry. It begins with the ministry and ends with the ministry. That's who we are. That's what we do. And so we're providing on-campus residential housing with a commercial mixed-use component. Roughly half of the commercial is the BCM, and so we're limiting that. That's really not what we're about. In terms of the other commercial, it's really the hub of this property is the ministry. And so we don't have student housing quads. We just have 1- and 2-bedroom residential that will be most likely occupied by upper class and possibly some faculty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warwick. Is there anyone else here to speak to this tonight? Thank you. All right, we are going to come to discussion. This is in District 4, so Commissioner Wright, kick us off.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation, and I fully support this. Staff had approved it. Planning Commission approved it. It's been vetted for a long time for the what's happening with the land swap, and I think it's a great improvement from what used to be 2 fraternity houses. And so this is a great upgrade. I believe, and Jeff might need to speak to this, do you have some limits on what the other commercial, didn't you tell me that there was some compatibility with the other commercial entities that you would be making sure they were compatible with being under your roof?
Yes,
there were
ma'am.
some.
At the corner of South Lumpkin and Ray is really the pin corner of the property, and what we're putting in there is a retail support type function, which is a food and beverage that supports the BCM and will be open to students and anyone who happens to be walking by. It's really just a ministry draw, if you will. So I really don't like to do a lot of tenant-driven real estate. And so that's really not what this is about. You know, we may find room for co-working. There may be something, a use that the university can use, but we're not trying to over-retail that by any means.
There's not a liquor license going to be going with this property.
That's a great question. No, there is not. And I have 3 pages of use restrictions in the documents that prevent all of those things.
Well,
So-
that was what I wanted to make sure if anybody had any questions. This is downtown growing in a good way. in my opinion, and I support it, and I encourage everybody to look at this document, and please send any questions or inquiries that you have so that we can answer them, so that I hope it's unanimous when we vote on it October 1. Thanks for answering that.
Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I mean, this is effectively student housing on campus, which is what we want to see. I mean, it's not technically on campus once it's been swapped, but yeah, I mean, I share Commissioner Wright's sentiments. I'm trying to understand. So the only entry into the parking deck will be on Ray Street. I'm trying to figure out the access to the parking deck.
It's in the middle of the building off of South Lumpkin.
Oh, it is off of South Lumpkin. Okay, I guess this image is from Ray. Okay. Has TPW had any comments about that? Or I guess there's an existing driveway there, isn't there?
There
There's
is.
several.
There's several.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I was just trying to get oriented on the image there.
Any others? Commissioner Hool.
Yeah, my question is actually about taxation. So I see that 450 is a tax exempt property, but this is moving from a government zoned, which is untaxed, to commercial general and commercial downtown. It sounds like there's a lot that's going to be happening here that's not just worship. So is this going to be a taxed property, or the
Yes.
majority of it taxed?
It
Okay,
was in the
Yes,
slide
it is.
presentation.
okay.
Yeah, one of the provisions of Georgia tax code is that only those components that are used for a ministerial purpose can be non-taxed, but obviously a student bedroom is different than a ministerial purpose. So,
So that is another boon to this.
anyone else? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, and we have one text amendment to discuss tonight.
Yes, we do. So this is a amendment to our current inclusionary zoning wording as found in Chapter 927. This has been a cooperative effort to bring this to you. It has been in development for quite some time, honestly. The request is to take a look. It's the result of operating since April 5th of 2022 with our current wording, and some lessons that have been learned, honestly. We've had really one development come through at 155 Mitchell Street that has used the provisions of the ordinance, and they used the payment in lieu option, and that was the Core States project. We do have 3 projects right now pending, all 3 of them legitimate, and have invested a good bit of time in navigating this particular ordinance and trying to make this work for their financing, but also make it work for their site, which has proven to be challenging in some spots, so it's taken a little bit of time. So the ordinance changes here really were initiated first by Housing and Community Development staff. And we worked with a variety of staff people in that department to arrive at the language that you have before you. The attorney's office has been super helpful in making sure that we're getting our wording buttoned down, because this is not your typical zoning chapter by any stretch. So what we've got in front of you are really, they can be summarized into 6 points of change. One is simplifying the rents so that we're using the HUD home rents rather than a fairly complex series of calculations. This streamlines it, indexes it, and puts it in something that is easier to administer, and honestly is more using the same terms that folks who are comfortable, developers that are comfortable doing these developments, they've used elsewhere. It's consistent, and we're not having to explain our local regs differently than what other communities are doing. Second point, one of the things that is unique to a college town is that we do differentiate between bedrooms and dwelling units. That has provided some challenges with folks putting together pro formas and then getting to town and realizing, oh, a unit's not a unit. We're actually counting bedrooms here. So with regard to density bonuses, ordinance enforcement, those things needed to be clarified. These text amendments do that. We had a reference to fee simple transactions in the original ordinance. That was because there's still an intention to look at single-family inclusionary zoning. That effort has yet to take shape, so to avoid any confusion, again, with developers wanting to use this, we needed to remove those references to being fee simple. All of these things are dealing with rental properties. Talking about an inclusionary housing agreement and the land use restriction agreement. These two agreements are important, and there's a timing aspect to this. When you have an applicant who's not the owner at the time that the plans are submitted, it creates a challenge of when these things need to be executed. Our current ordinance requires them to be executed at a time when they don't have the legal right to do so. So there's power of attorney and these other machinations that have to come into play that make it more complicated. We want those to be streamlined. And there was no need for them to be complicated. I think that's just, again, a lesson that's been learned. Clarifying that affordable housing must be leased by the dwelling unit rather than by the unit, which is bedroom. We've actually had some of these submittals come in and talk about affordable bedrooms within a market rate unit. And the way our code is currently worded, there's some ambiguity, and that's not anything we ever want. It was not the design intent, and it's certainly not the thing that we want to have to try to enforce moving forward, that in a 4-bedroom apartment, the bedroom in the back corner is the affordable one. That creates a moving target. It's just difficult, and it's unnecessary. And then related to that is clarifying some of our ability to conduct ongoing on-site monitoring beyond the approval, We've learned that there's some language from other municipalities and some other statute that we can fold into this to make those relationships much clearer than our current ordinance would allow for. So the overarching goal of all of this is to make the program more successful. And we are responding to the things that we've heard from developers that are used to doing inclusionary zoning elsewhere. These were things that were question marks, and we're just trying to fix those. So Planning Commission's recommendation, following seeing it in July, where they offered significant comment, staff went back, worked together, brought amendments to those changes and clarified some things. So their action at their last meeting was to recommend approval of the amendments as presently proposed.
All right, thanks, Bruce. Is there anyone here to speak to this tonight? All right, any commissioners have questions about this? I know, kind of having looked at the marked up text, it can seem kind of complex, but it's my experience that sometimes you get a couple of years into using a new tool and you just want to make that tool work better. And I really appreciate staff and HCD being willing to lean into this. Commissioner Taylor.
I would like to thank Bruce and staff for this document as well, because it puts it in human language that we can understand. So thank you. I'll be using it.
That helps us too.
Anyone else? All right, Bruce, I appreciate your time with us tonight. Thank you very much. I will relocate back to my other position. All right, and next order of business is going to be public input on old and new business. And so that includes 2 items that have been moved from the consent agenda, item 6 and item 10. And then the previously indicated old and new business, which are items 19 through 33. So items 6, 10, and 19 through 33. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to any of those items? All right, hearing the crickets out there in the room, I'm going to move to commission discussion, and we'll begin with item 6. This is the 2024-2025 HUD Continuum of Care Homeless Assistance Grant application. Commissioner Houle, you asked that this be up for discussion.
Yeah, I just wanted to, this is more a question seeking information before we vote, but I'm happy to place it back on consent for now. And it's just, with the restructuring of the homeless coalition, how was their staff and board involved in the process now, and how does our staff anticipate that might change in next year's, go through this process? Next year's cycle.
We can get you a full report of your question or full answer to it, but I asked the question ahead of time, and here's the answer, is that, that really the process stays the same. the executive director and the Homes Coalition will interface just like they did in the past. So there's really no difference there, but we can certainly get you a lot more detail if you need that.
Yeah, I think kind of what I'm getting at here is, my understanding is one of the benefits of restructuring the Homeless Coalition was that they were going to take on more of the work of some of this stuff, and that over time would alleviate some of the burden on HCD staff. And so just understanding
Transition
if, when,
plan.
how that's actually taking place.
Absolutely. I
If
can
this is
get you the
impetus for that.
transition plan. That makes sense.
Any other questions about this? Commissioner Hool, can we put that back on consent?
Yeah, happy to have it on consent,
Okay.
just, barring anything weird coming up in that report.
Okay. 6 is going back on consent. No, of course, we'll get some more information. And Commissioner Hool, you asked for a discussion of item 10 as well, the hazard mitigation plan update.
Yeah, I'd like to keep this one off consent, and my reasoning is, in our work session, we talked about this at length, and there were 2 other plans that were mentioned that are not in here and that I haven't seen yet, the emergency response plan and the emergency shelter plan. It seemed like a lot of what, at least but I think others on this body were anticipating this plan to include are actually details that are in those plans. And so I guess I'd like to see those in whatever draft form they're in before we're approving this. And I'd like to understand more clearly, how they cross-reference each other before we approve this. So that, reiterating the request for those documents, and then I guess my other question, happy to hear whatever you've got now for us, is are there any negative repercussions to us delaying the adoption of this plan by one cycle if we want to take time to get into all those many plans?
Potentially. The emergency shelter plan is, in fact, in your inbox. I just sent that a little bit earlier. What other plan did you want to get your hands on?
I believe the fire chief mentioned the emergency response plan, which was like our local sort of plan for coordinating with other agencies to respond. And I mean, I'm going to be honest, in that work session, I felt like I was learning that there were way more layers to the stinky onion of hazard mitigation than I thought we were expecting in terms of reports, and so I guess I'd like to understand the complete picture better before we move forward with this.
Okay, so the emergency response plan, we can get that for you.
Or that's the term that he used, I guess, yeah.
Yes.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, we had a really good presentation from Chief Moss. Well, I mean, it's a lot in the plan, but he did a pretty good job of presenting it in broad terms. And one thing that came up, there seems to be some pushing towards removing the emergency services from the fire department, separating these 2 departments, which of course there's a massive cost. A lot, that.
We won't be doing that anytime soon. I think we
Yeah.
need to evaluate that. Chief Moss has expressed his desire, as you heard. That's not something that we're looking into right now. That's probably a future state,
Yeah.
years down the road.
That's what it sounded like, but I just want to take this opportunity to remind everyone, if we're talking about cutting costs and having fiscal challenges in the coming years, creating a whole new department, especially a department like emergency services, which is, very capital intensive, lots of equipment. We might have to have a serious conversation about reaching out to the university and other nonprofit untaxed entities in the community about an emergency fee structure, which is common in other communities, to effectively raise the revenue to pay for these things. We've already invested quite a lot, in equipment, particularly trucks that can reach tall buildings, to accommodate our changing built environment, particularly as it comes to student housing and high rises. So I just want to put that out there in the public, that this is a conversation that I feel we really, really need to have in this community, particularly being that we are a university town with, close to a third of our population, student population, and a huge chunk of our land off the tax rolls due to that.
Anything else on 10? All right, we're going to go ahead and move to 19. 19, that is old business, is the resolution to approve the plan for periodic recapture of unspent ARPA funds. I know everybody was concerned that there be some graceful ramp in of this program so that somebody who had just received funds, we're not expected to spend them the next morning. I'm being a little extreme in that, but essentially that was the concern. Any questions tonight? Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, I'm just looking at this now, but I just want to make sure I understand this. So in this attachment, there is a process for projects that were contracted in 2023 and one for 2024, and really looking at those organizations having expended 25% of their approved budget by the end of quarter one, 50% by quarter two, 75% by quarter three. And so the details are in here, of course, anyone wants to look at it, but I assume the process here is, once we approve this, you're going to share this process with everyone out there, and then come January, you guys will be looking at this, looking at who has not spent 25% of their money, and you're going to be putting an agenda-setting item together in February, and we would vote to terminate that contract in March. Is that correct?
Yes, and it wouldn't be as clear-cut as that. There's a little bit of nuance. We're going to work with the agency to make sure,
You mean, but I mean, the way it lays it out here is in January, you will contact them first before it goes into the termination.
and we would work with them the entire time. That's right. So we're pretty hands-on as it relates to contracts,
Okay.
right? So,
Okay.
up until, even if it's in the agenda cycle, we're still going to work with them to see if they can still expend the money.
Okay, so not only will we be working to help them, we behind the rail to perhaps look at close situations, but you'll be working in that way.
Yes, ma'am.
As you always have.
That's right.
Perhaps too much so sometimes. Okay, thank you.
All right, any others?
Consent.
Go ahead, Commissioner Hool, and then we'll look to see if we want to do consent.
Yeah, I just wanted to, the deadlines that are being mapped out here, have they already been, or will they be communicated to the leadership of the agencies that have,
Yes.
okay, I'm so sorry. I was completely zoned out when you were talking,
Yes,
so.
I just had to
okay.
clarify that.
I'm so
As soon as we
sorry.
approve this.
Yeah, I was, my head was somewhere else.
Yeah.
I was just waiting for my turn, like a jerk, not listening. The worst. Consent's great.
All right, consent? Everybody okay with consent? All right, 19 is consent. All right. 20, and you have a draft recommendation that I crafted after discussion with each member of this body in front of you, and this is the draft funding allocations. This is a discussion item at our retreat on Thursday, so expect Thursday afternoon discussion of this, but if anybody would like to make any preliminary notes now, you certainly have that opportunity. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, so this item is for the design services, about $290,000.
No, this is item 20, the ARPA fund allocation.
Oh, sorry.
We're not there
I'm
yet.
ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Commissioner Hool?
Yeah, just and I'm said this is the problem, right? I was looking at this agenda item when you're thinking about bad math. So it says 499,720 in this agenda item left over from business workforce. But then the agenda item we approved earlier noted 480,000 and change, which would be like 555 after we add back in the 75 we pulled out. So I'm just,
So
I
we
guess
would
I'm
have to
curious
true
on like
that
the
up.
math of that, and like basically if there are additional funds that this agenda item hasn't contemplated, how much, and maybe having that in advance of our retreat would be helpful, especially because the JDA had noted their capacity to do more than just what we had given them in today's approval, and so maybe that's one place we could look that's timely.
We will get a true to the moment contemporary snapshot for our Thursday discussion. Commissioner Myers?
This is just a reminder to myself and all of us, because I just pulled up the agenda, and that discussion is at the dark hour of 4:30 to 5:30 on Thursday. So,
There'll be a pot of coffee ahead of that.
yeah, okay, well, there's a break at 2:45, okay. So hopefully we'll be able to deal with that in an hour.
I'm confident. Feeling good, team. All right, we're going to move on to 21, and this is the North Oconee River Sanitary Sewer Interceptor Crossing Design and Services during construction. Commissioner Link?
Yes, sorry. So $290,000, this item is for design and services. We have these other capital expenses that, these are total budgets. Is there an ETA, an estimated budget for this? I was digging through and I didn't quite see anything, but I might have missed it. Do we have a general ballpark idea of how much this entire project is going to cost?
Ballpark. So there are two potential fixes here, two crossings, probably $2.5–3 million apiece. I say probably because it depends on one of the crossings, how we're going to do it. Is it going to be an aerial crossing? Is it going to be hanging on a bridge? Is it going to be a utility bridge? So all those things are factors, obviously, in the cost of the construction. So if all goes well, $2.5–3 million
Okay.
per crossing.
Per crossing. So we're looking
that's
at
two different crossings. So estimated
About
$6 million.
5–6 million. Okay.
Estimated.
Okay.
It could easily be, $8 million.
Okay.
But we'll have better numbers once design is complete.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions on that one? All right, moving on to 22. This is closely related to our special called session agenda to repair the inmate elevator. Any questions about that? Yeah, Commissioner Houle?
Yeah, so earlier you had mentioned getting the 2 elevators online, and I've heard through the judicial grapevine that the, third is on the fritz too. So where does that fit into this? Is this just about the inmate elevator and then the other 2 are going to be handled with future agenda items, or is this all we need to do to kind of get the ball rolling on all 3?
So 2 of them need to be fixed right now. So it's not just about the inmate elevator. The inmate elevator will occur first. What you will see in a future agenda item is a sub-project for the space facilities modernization. Basically, what we're going to do is take money from the judicial center and just go ahead and spend it on updating, modernizing the current courthouse. And that's probably going to be about a $2 million ask, $3 million ask as a sub-project of the current space modernization or facilities modernization project in the SPLOST. But that's to help with the 3 elevators, HVAC, and other things such as the roof, possibly some security upgrades.
Okay. And so I think it's worth noting that those would be the kind of upgrades that would be necessary for any user of the building just to make the building functional. Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, just a question. Maybe I was spacing out on this one, but on the funding source in the agenda report, it says general capital.
That's correct, because we do not have the sub-project yet, so currently we need to go ahead and fix it, so we're going to use general capital in central services budget. That's correct.
Okay, so this is money we have available, right, in central services. We are in budget.
Budgeted for other items, but facilities in general.
Facilities in general as we prepare. So I just had a comment from the public that perhaps this is not something we were prepared for, but we have funds prepared for dealing with things like this.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Was there also something in here about elevator services repair services being backed up, or am I misremembering that? Is that why it's taking so long? Like,
Well, ordering the part, there's a whole slew of issues that are creating
it takes a
the
while.
time, yeah.
Okay.
So, ordering the parts is a major one. And then, yes, elevator services are backed up as well. So, and then inspections of the elevators.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Anyone else before I return to Commissioner Houle? Right ahead.
Yeah, just thinking through the future use of SPLOST money for this facility specifically, and thinking back to when we were approving our budget and we augmented funding for facilities, but it was still well under what was requested by staff. Can we also use that funding to reimburse the funding here?
That's absolutely the intent,
Okay.
because to Commissioner Myers' question, those funds were budgeted elsewhere, but for facilities. So we do need to supplant them with SPLOST funds, and that would be the plan with the sub-project.
Everybody,
So I guess, sorry,
go ahead.
I guess I'm wondering if this is only 600,000 for a portion of the problem, we know we're going to need more, but we know we can use the SPLOST money to reimburse this after we set up the sub-project. Why not allocate more now?
The immediate need right now are 2 elevators. That's the immediate need. The other elevator is still operational. It's been worked on quite a bit, but
Yeah.
it's still operational. So right now, we're trying to prioritize, and the priority right now are the 2 elevators, inmate elevator and the other passenger elevator.
Okay, but if the turnaround time for this is the better part of a year, and we just passed a potential judicial emergency order in case it's needed, because we're not confident that one's going to last. I guess I'm just wondering, why not get the ball rolling on purchasing the items needed for the third one while we're doing these 2? Does that make sense?
Yeah, we can look into it.
Okay.
Consent, off consent?
I mean, I guess I'd want to leave off consent, because if it makes sense for us to amend this to get the ball rolling on those things sooner.
Okay. Well, I've just been notified it is for all 3 elevators.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind. Consent.
All right, 22 is consent. All right, 23, let's see if we can do the same thing. This is to transfer funds from the airport's unrestricted net position to the airport's operating fund to finance the approval of the airport capital improvement proposed project at the parking lot. GDOT kind of requires this approach so that we have some kind of local match. Commissioner Culpepper?
Can I ask a question about 21? Not just a question.
Yeah.
Does that address the sewer issue capacity that we keep hearing about with the Classic Center Arena and all that?
It does.
So what is the timeline?
If all goes well, 2 years.
23, any questions? 23 consent, all right, you heard it here. All right, 24, another airport project. This is the Taxiway B, pavement rehabilitation and lighting.
Consent.
All right, 24 is consent. All right, 25 is the public art type and location for the lovely Costa Building next door, which is getting closer and closer to completion.
Consent.
Consent it is. All right, 26 is the payment in lieu of taxes request for the aforementioned Lexington Flats on Lexington Road, and this is parallel with work we've already done with the Housing Authority right behind Kroger on Highway 72 and next to the large Target on Atlanta Highway.
I would like to put this on hold until I can talk to the developers.
All right, we will get some more information from the Housing Authority and the Development Group. Any further questions about this? All right, 27 is the Courthouse audio-visual equipment modernization project, and this is the vendor selection stage. Any questions about that?
Consent.
27 is consent. All right. 28 is nuisance abatement and control demolition project scope of work amendment.
Consent.
Questions about this? What is it? All right. 28 is consent. 29 is Project FAST. This is charging an infrastructure grant program.
Yes, consent.
All right, 29 is consent. Item 30 is Honey Tree Drive repair, and this is from the calendar year 24 pavement maintenance fund.
For the love of God, consent.
All right, we are winning this evening, my friends. 31 is the FY24 comprehensive performance audit of employee recruitment, hiring, and orientation. Questions about this, or as a committee member, would you like to address this, Commissioner Myers?
But I'd like to leave this on the voting, not put it on consent, because I think it's important item as we're moving forward to bring public attention to, and it's quite lengthy document, so I want to give us all time to look at it a little bit more. But I look forward to approving it, accepting it, whatever the correct word is there.
All right. All right, item 32 will be confirmation of a contract award already provided. And this would allow the body to ratify this contract award. Residents of Pittard Road and Star Road have for many years been concerned about the quality of their drinking water, and through a partnership between the Southern Environmental Law Center and those residents, they've had a much more contemporary test done of their drinking well water, and it's been determined that some of the component chemicals in PFAS, or what are commonly known as forever chemicals, are present. And so we are of no charge connecting those residents to public safe drinking water and providing them for 6 months of water at no charge. So this has taken a long time, but I'm glad it's moving forward. So, oh, it's okay. Just add input from Commissioner
I'm
Link.
happy to see it on consent. I just want to thank the mayor for hooking these folks up with the Southern Environmental Law Center and seeing this through, and then finally getting some justice for these folks who've been through a lot. I just, I'm hoping others out there that are on well water will look into seeing that their wells are properly tested, because those forever chemicals are showing up all over the place. They're showing up coming out of sewer systems and on agricultural land that's sprayed with sewage byproduct. So, this is something we really need to be aware of, and I am eager to see to it that these folks get on public water and that we can cover their fees for that for a while and get them set up.
Commissioner Davenport?
And thank the mayor and staff for getting this done. Can we get a list, put this on consent, but can we get a list of the amount of homes that are on well water in Athabasca County?
Can Public Utilities provide that, working with planning?
So
Is that,
we can try. I think there are nuances because we tried to understand how many wells were within the vicinity of this area, right? And we were not able to come up with an exact number. So determining how many wells are in entire county is possible, but there's going to be a margin of error there. But we can give you a roundabout number.
okay.
Thanks for that. All right, we'll move that to consent. And then item 33 is the College Square Pedestrian Plaza. We, of course, talked about this in our recent work session, and this just outlines the alternative project delivery concept.
Consent.
Commissioner Houle?
Sorry, I need a moment if you have a question. Yeah.
No, I'm just wondering if this is something, because it's been so long and that it's such a significant thing for the community, if we want to leave it on for any discussion, or I guess people could discuss it being on the consent agenda, can't they?
I think we should leave it off consent, yeah, because there is going to be a great deal of public interest in this.
Yeah.
And I think we should all try and reach out to the public and let them know it's coming up.
And then it also gives us, obviously, the opportunity to reflect on any comments that we do get, so that we have that full public process as we move forward in this wonderful project to transform a special part of downtown.
Commissioner Houle?
Yeah, so following on the conversation we had in the work session, I think the two things I'm wondering about with approving this as is are stormwater improvements, which were initially noted as part of this, and now the proposal we got didn't include those, I believe, right? And so if we move forward with this agenda item as is, what are we doing about stormwater, I guess is one question.
Well, we haven't gotten into design at this point.
So there'd be several other layers of approval, I guess.
There will be, and if the direction from the mayor and commission is to make sure, hey, that we're taking care of stormwater here, there are certain things that I think the mayor and commission can ask for.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I guess that is something I'm wondering, and then how do we specify that in here? If it's not at this stage and can be at a later stage, fine, but we're having stormwater issues all over the place. Having one in the heart of downtown after we rebuild this thing seems like a missed opportunity,
So certainly, and as we talked about at the work session, I think not just Nikki, we've talked about it. I've heard about the challenges at Clayton Street, and I think everyone's concerned about what's under College Square. And so, as we dig it up, there's probably opportunities for us to deal with all sorts of utility issues, and stormwater being one of those. As you know, there's going to be a cost to it.
Sure.
And, understanding the financing of all these things is going to be really critical as well.
And then I guess the other question I have is, I know it was referenced that they were going to be doing something for shade, but, if you walk through College Square now with the existing trees that are probably quite a bit larger than whatever expensive ones they put in the ground if they have to replace them, there's still just a kind of sun-baked middle that in the summer is terrible. Like, it's not enjoyable to be in, So I guess I'm just curious for more information from them on how they're planning to make it shadier, so this is actually a plaza people want to be in during the time of year where the weather is most amenable to being outside.
They, outside of the larger trees that they said they were going to put in, they also talked about the shade structure, so maybe some of those things, is that what you're
Yeah,
thinking?
and then when that got raised up, I saw staff kind of concerned about whether the fire department would be amenable to those things actually working, and, I would hate for us to put $7 million into a square that no one wants to use in the summer because it's too hot. So, maybe it's not us putting $7 million, but the community through the Downtown Development Authority certainly is, so, yeah.
Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, following up on that, I do remember that some of our event organizers, after perhaps AthFest, sometime or other, sent us something, communicated in some way, perhaps a social media posting, about some communities that are using some temporary large shade structures that can be set up and put down. And so that's, I want to have the community have obviously there's going to be public input, but that's something I think is very important to look into and not pass up the opportunity to do something about that.
And I think one of the things that kind of anybody in this room and certainly anybody listening may want to engage the designer around in those public input sessions is something of a shade study. That's one of the kind of visuals that I've often seen in projects like this. So, here's where the shade falls at 9 a.m., here's where it falls at noon, here's where it falls at 3 in the afternoon, just to kind of get a sense of that comfort level.
Yeah.
If nothing else, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I think
I just want to make sure the public knows that there will be public input on this, and I believe there were some dates in October, like the second and third week of October, that we're going to be seeing some public input sessions, so I think that will be going out soon. I'll be sure to try and get it out there.
Okay, and we will make sure that's in the record at our October meeting. Got a motion from Commissioner Taylor to adjourn. Is there a second?
second.
All right, second from Commissioner Myers. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries, and I hope everybody has a lovely evening.